Hello everybody, I'm Day Weather Meteorologist Don Day with your Public Lands Council weekly weather update for this December 14th, 2024, brought to you by AgRisk Advisors and WSR Insurance Services Incorporated. Well, as we go into the middle here of December, these are the highlights for the western United States. First of all, mountain snows are coming back. After better than a week of very little mountain snow, we'll see snows returning. Unfortunately, with a couple of exceptions, moisture out on the plains is just not there. I know I got a lot of super dry pastures out there in many areas, but for another week, there's just not going to be much coming off the mountain slopes. While it's good news that the mountains and the mountain slopes and the snowpack areas will be getting some snow, it's still a struggle for another week on the plains. We don't expect Arctic air, as Pacific weather is going to dominate the lower 48. So we'll see the nation's temperatures even out a little bit. The Arctic chill that's had a firm grip on a lot of the central and eastern United States will ease. So we're not expecting anything too cold. We're probably going to get in a more busy weather pattern Christmas week. It looks like Christmas week into the new year. The western United States should probably expect to get colder and maybe better chances for precipitation. That's something that will certainly update you again next week, but that Christmas week into the New Year's week looks to be more busy. Over the last week, you can see very spotty precipitation in the western United States, other than some moisture there in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, and a little bit of snow up into the northern plains areas here, and some decent snows in the Black Hills country. Really very little else going on in the west. Temperature-wise, well, when you are dry in December, you're probably a little bit warmer than average, and that was certainly the case for another week. The colder weather was from the plains and points east, while the western United States warmer, especially along and east of the divide. For the month of December, so far, if we go from December 1st to the 13th, you can see that the nation, a lot of the nation, has had a cold December so far in the central and the east, from the northern plains to the east, while the western United States has been warmer than average. Probably for another week or so. That's going to generally be the trend before these changes come Christmas and New Year's week. We have a series of Pacific waves. We've got this one here, we've got this one here, and this one here that'll be moving through three waves in the western United States through the middle of next week. There's Tuesday, and then between now and the middle of the week, you can see that here's the mountain snows returning. Other than this snow up here in the northern plains and southern Canada, you can see very spotty precipitation along and east of the divide, just very little. But the mountains are going to get back into the snowfall from the Sierras to the Cascades to the Bitterroot to the Yellowstone Plateau to the Central Rockies of Colorado and southern Wyoming. Well, at least the high country gets back into some precipitation. As we get to the end of next week, we've got this big high pressure ridge that will again make the mild weather return to the west. So while we have an active pattern in the west through Wednesday, by Thursday through Sunday, it's this high pressure ridge that will dominate. Very cold, wintry weather will hit the Great Lakes in the northeast again with a possible winter storm situation here late next week and next weekend. But as we get into Christmas week, this is what happens. The jet stream starts to flatten out, and we start to see storms coming off the west coast into the west again. And if we get the high pressure ridge to develop there, that will open the door to Canada and the Pacific. So this is why Christmas week into the New Year's timeframe, the western half of the U.S. may start to see more cold and more of a winter weather pattern developing. Over the next week, it's still the same areas getting wet, but it does look more wet for California and into the Rockies, with precipitation here on the increase. But as you can see, out here on the plains and across the desert southwest, we continue to just have these areas that are drier. And that trend is generally going to continue with the wet and the most stormy weather in the central and the east for another week. Temperature-wise, you can see a lot of the U.S. is not going to be as cold, but we still have this persistent cold in the northern plains along the east slopes of the Rockies and across south central Canada. This is likely how it's going to go into the early part of next week before around and after Christmas time, some of that cold comes a little bit further south and further west. Snowfall-wise, this is how it looks over the next week, again favoring the northern tier of the U.S. and the mountainous areas. Have yourself a good week ahead. We'll see you next week.